But someone told me 60 years ago, I'd be standing here in the United States of America talking to distinguished gentlemen and ladies. I would never believe it. I tried to kill myself when I was 10 because I simply could not catch up with the rest of the students because I was so weak. I was off every other week with sickness. Little sniffle turned to bronchitis turned to pneumonia, and here we go again. I was off all week. In Japan, the educational system is so brutal. It's all based on memorization. You have to memorize 75,000 characters about time you graduate from junior high school. So you could imagine the practice and memory. So if you're off 1 week, not only you have to memorize that week that you missed, plus additional week. I could not catch up. My grades were almost close to incomplete. All the grades were F, except one subject, geography. Math, F. English or Japanese English, F. And you know, when you get to that point, not only the peer pressure is tremendous, but the family pressure is 10 times worse than the peer pressure. Especially our family. My father was born in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1914. He was a second generation Japanese American, came to Japan in 1930s because he was kicked out of a Punahou school. Remember the President Obama went to Punahou? My father was the first non-white student in the entire school in 1930s. And the principal hated that. So he was determined to kick him out. And unfortunately, my father was kind of a troublemaker, rabble-rouser, went against the school rules. So one Sunday, he was selling the newspaper, going from the streetcar to streetcar in Honolulu with shorts and bare feet. That was against the dress code of an all-white school. And guess what? The principal was in one of those streetcars. So next Monday, he was expelled from school. And my grandfather was so disgraced. He had no choice but to send him back to Japan to be disciplined by his cousin. I felt sorry for my father's cousin. Now, my mother was his cousin, first cousin, went back to Japan to take care of her grandparents in 1930. So that's how they wind up in Japan. even though they were second generation Japanese. And of course, December 7, 1941, Japanese attacked the Pearl Harbor, and that was end of them ever coming back to the United States. But I got to tell you one other thing. I think our family as a whole is the only family in the United States that kicked in the front and kicked in the back in 1941 and 1945. My grandfather got the contract for the United States Navy in 1939 to renovate Pearl Harbor. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Pearl Harbor. That is the worst naval base that you could ever imagine. Because at the throat of Pearl Harbor, not only narrow, but it's shallow. All it takes is one ship to be sunk at that point, and that entire base becomes useless. So he was making that deeper and wider. And when the Japanese plane with the rising sun dropping a bomb, he knew his life was over. Only thing he could say, "You stupid idiot." And he knew that he's in big, big trouble. So he run home, and got his papers and money put together. And sure enough, 7:30 in the evening, 6 FBI agents, that all bigger than him, kicked the door in, arrested him, handcuffed him, and blindfolded him, and took him to San Francisco. And they charged him with a treason, because he is the only Japanese that had the blueprints of Pearl Harbor. They added 1 and 1 and came up with 3. They said, "Go and get that guy. He must have passed the blueprints to the other side." So when he was arrested during the interrogation at the FBI headquarters, they brought boxes after boxes of surveillance. Would you believe he was under surveillance ever since he got the contract from the United States Navy in 1939? They knew who he met with. They knew when he went to bed, when he had sex, when he had a breakfast, everything you could think of, they were surveying his movement. And charged him with a treason. He had no idea. As you know, the Japanese had a spy. I'm talking about a Japanese American had a spy in Tokyo, sending a message back to Washington, D.C. When the Japanese Armada fleet took off, he sent a message. They left. We knew exactly when they're going to get to Pearl Harbor. It wasn't my grandfather that passed on the blueprints. These guys knew exactly which ship was where and everything. So my grandfather was taken from San Francisco to New Mexico to Wyoming, just outside of Cody, Wyoming, and they put him in an internment camp called Hot Mountain. He was known as Infamous 7, most wanted criminal in the United States. He was just a contractor. I don't know how familiar you are with Hawaii. You don't pay property tax. You pay lease tax. Nobody owns the property in Hawaii. You lease the property from the government. And if you don't pay lease tax in 1 year, they take that privilege away. He was in there for 3 years. So he lost everything he owned. Oh, I forgot to mention to you. My grandfather was a wealthy contractor, so he stashed away a lot of savings in a safe. So he put money belt on his wife, who was invalid. He thought that nobody would touch her. Oh boy, was he wrong. The United States Navy took her away to the hospital in Honolulu. And guess who found the money? His brother. They were undressing her to put the hospital gown. He found all these money on her body. So he instantly became a millionaire. And I talked to my sister. I said, "Sister, haven't you ever thought about something?" His brother, all of a sudden, 1941, actually 1942, but a biggest estate in Hawaii, beautiful limousine. Where did he get the money? From his brother. So she said, "Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?" Because this was my grandfather also. That was my father's father. Okay, remember my mother and my father is a first cousin? He was nothing but two-bit gambler, cheating gambler. So how did he get money all of a sudden? Anyway, that's our family secret. So any case, I lived for 37 million minutes up to this point. I'm not going to tell you every minute that I survived. I was able to condense my life into about 10 minutes of video. So I like Jeremy to go ahead and turn that on. And I like you to listen to. So if you have any questions, I'll be able to answer that after the talk. Enjoy.
He's a third-generation Japanese American who survived the destruction and horrors of nuclear war. His passionate dedication to communicate his family's experiences as victims of the first atomic blast and the effects of radiation from the perspective of forgiveness is inspiring. How he got from the brink of death to a mission for peace is the story he will share with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Toshiharu Kano.
Ohayou gozaimasu. Good morning. I've been waiting this opportunity for the last 72 years because I wanted to tell what happened on August 6, 1945. You need to know. We are again at the brink of another nuclear war. The former secretary indicated in next 10 years, having a nuclear war is 50-50 chance. That's not a good odds. So what I want to talk about is what happened that day on August 6, 1945. Our family, my father, my mother, my sister, and my older brother was only less than a half a mile from the center when a little boy from Enola Gay exploded 1,900 feet above the ground. 100 out of 100 people asked me, how did you survive? I don't know. I lost my brother 2 months after the bomb. I was born March 1st, 1946. In other words, I was 12 weeks along inside of my mother when the bomb dropped. Now, the doctors cannot believe I stayed inside of my mother. Because when that bomb blew up, the concussion force came at us 10,560 feet per second, 2 miles per second. I should have been instantaneously aborted. Like many people, instantaneously, 80,000 people perished. 140,000 passed away within 2 weeks. 240,000 died by end of 1945. So I am really glad I have the chance to talk with you today. I really feel I'm blessed. And I need to educate you because how many of you are born after the war? Most of you. Would you believe if you walk in downtown Tokyo, Ginza, 80% to 85% of the population of Japan was born after the war. So when you ask them what happened on August 6, 1945, they have no clue. That's why I'm here, to tell you we cannot afford to have another nuclear weapon. You know why? Today, we have 15,000 bombs between 9 nations. If you use one of those 5 bombs, New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Hong Kong, London, we will kill over 300 million people. That's about 4 times more people died during the World War II, including Jewish people. Just 5 bombs. That's not the end of it. When that thing blows up, you know what happens? Fallout radiation. That's more deadlier than anything you can imagine. I got exposed to gamma rays. I was sick all the time. I missed third of the school year. I was bottom of the bottom in the class standing. In other words, I was called as a hopeless case. People that wind up in the gutter. Besides, I want to tell you something that you don't even know. People of Japan isolated us because we are damaged, exposed to the radiation. No woman will ever marry me. My sister will never able to have a normal child. We just celebrated her 75th birthday in Vegas last Sunday. She never had a child. So I asked him, why didn't you get married? Because I'm damaged. See, that's what I'm saying. Psychological impact of the bomb, you probably didn't even know. I don't have a scars like most of the victims. But I suffer a lot. From the time that I was born to 15 years old, I was sick almost every other week. Every sniffle, turns into bronchitis, and bronchitis turned to pneumonia, and I was off 2 weeks school. I lost 20% of my left lung with a tuberculosis. I had kidney failure on both kidney. I had rheumatic fever. I had liver failure. I had mumps. Would you believe I had mumps 7 times? I could never get over that stupid thing. And you know what doctor told me? Last mumps that I had, I was 14. He said, Tosh, I hope you will never get the mumps when you're a teenager, 18 or 19. You'll never be able to have a child of your own. Luckily, I didn't. But I had my firstborn son in 1973. My wife could not have a normal birth, had to have a cesarean section. Doctor gave us an X-ray to tell me what the procedure is going to go through. You know what I was doing? I was counting 2 eye sockets, 10 fingers, and 10 toes. When I counted the last toe, all of the years of fear went down the drain. That's what I'm talking about. We can afford to have another nuclear war. You know, it was such a tiny little bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. It was only 15,000 ton equivalent. But if you put that amount of TNT on the truck, end to end, it will go 6 miles. Today's hydrogen bomb is equivalent to 100 million tons. If you put that TNT on the truck, just like the first bomb, it will go around the earth 1.5 times. Why do we need such a big bomb? It would destroy us all. You know, Russian, just for heck of it, blew up 100 megaton bomb. They almost killed themselves. Total destruction in Hiroshima was 5 square miles. Total destruction was 600 square miles. One bomb. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Oh, I forgot to mention to you, this year, 2018, is exactly same as 1945 calendar. So August 6th was Monday morning. 8:15 a.m., that's when the bomb exploded. It was the most beautiful sky with no cloud. Exploded 1,900 feet above the ground. It took 43 seconds before it detonated. The Kano tippets needed 43 seconds to get away from the center. There were 6.5 miles at 31,000 feet. By the way, I talked to Colonel Tippett in 1990, August 6th, commemorating his crew, he and his crew at Wendover, Utah, for their work. And I had a chance to speak with him. That was Saturday morning. The ceremony was conducted at noon. Afternoon, they had a barbecue lunch. So I was invited to lunch, even though they canceled my speech that evening, because Colonel didn't want anything to do with the Japanese again. Because Friday night, they had a press conference at Wendover. And among the presses, there was 3 press from Japan hidden among the crowd, and got up there and started accusing him and his crew for murder. So they had to be escorted out of the conference room. So here I come, not knowing what happened, right? I couldn't understand why they're giving me cold shoulders. So the hostess came up to me and said, Mr. Kano, I'm really sorry, but we canceled your speech. Colonel didn't want to be blasted again by you. I said, I wasn't going to do that, but he doesn't want you. So please, I had to apologize. But you're welcome to come to the barbecue. And I said to her, are you sure it's okay? She said, oh, it's no problem, no problem. So after I'd taken a nap, I took my family to the famous hangar at Wendover. We opened the door. Everybody was happy, chatting away. When I opened the door, they saw us. Stopped. You couldn't hear any chatter at all. If I had a nail and dropped it on the concrete, you could hear throughout the hangar. Anyway, she said, see those crew over there? That's Enola Gay's crew. I said, I'd like to talk to the colonel. And she said, I think that's a bad idea. So I kept watching him at the corner of my eyes as I'm eating the spare ribs. And I finished it very quickly, and I kind of sneaked out of the outside and came around and tapped on the colonel's shoulder. And he turned around and said, what do you want? I need to talk to you, Colonel. I said to him, do you know I was down there when you dropped the bomb? By the way, that was a mistake. And I said to him, I need to tell you something. He said, what is it? In a kind of an angry voice. I said, Colonel, if I were in your shoes, August 6, 1945, I would have done exactly the same thing because you were asked to fulfill your mission. Did you know, Colonel? Start to cry. He said, for you to tell me that we are doing our mission, it means a lot to me and my crew. I'd be happy to introduce you to the rest of my crew. So I shook hands with every one of them. But before that, he said, how close were you? Less than a half a mile. You know what he said? No way in the hell you could have survived. We almost didn't make it. When that bomb blew up, it created such a huge vacuum. Can you imagine concussion going out of the center at 2 miles per second? It created a huge vacuum and came to the center and went up 35,000 feet in the air. So he said, no way in the hell you could have survived. But I survived, Colonel. And he said, I'm glad that you made it. Anyway, I shook hands with every one of those crew members. And I tell you, that was the most memorable moment in my life. And I think it was 2009, we had an air show at the Wendover Airfield. Guess who I met? His grandson. Paul Tippett IV, Brigadier General of Air Force, commanding B-1 bomber. And I shook hands with him. He's the nicest person that I have ever met. And we shook hands. We became our best friends. So anyway, I just want to tell you that little bit of tidbits. And besides, I married, by the way, when they talk about the wife having a cesarean section, there's my wife back there, Rita. That's not my first wife. We met through eHarmony. I lost my first wife in 2008 after we were married for 40 years. So you mean she was the one that had the cesarean section. But in any case, I married a girl from North Dakota, half German and half Swede. Oh boy. My family, believe it or not, are one of the most proud samurai family in Hiroshima. Our name was Asano back in 1600s. If you look it up on the internet, you see Asano, Warlord Asano. He's the one that beheaded because he pulled a sword in his anger in Shogun's palace. And that's absolutely no-no. So the punishment was execution. At the same time, the Shogun destroyed our clan. So we had to change our name from Asano to Nekomoto. Neko means cat. Moto means great leader of cats. In other words, pussycat. And my father hated that name because every time he went from Hawaii to Japan or back from Japan to Hawaii, they always ask you at the custom, how do you spell your surname? And he has to say, cat. See, no Japanese have a cat as a surname because cat is known as a servant of the evil. Why do you want to name yourself cat? So they look at you with a funny eye, looking at cat. Wow. So not only he hated it, my grandfather hated it. Now I know why my grandfather forced my father to change the name, because myself and my sister or my siblings didn't want to have anything to do with Nekomoto, because Nekomoto was charged with treason in this country. He wanted us to have a freedom without that title. So I'm glad that we changed the name. We had to change the name twice to get away from persecution. But how many of you have seen the movie called Last Samurai? Tom Cruise. You saw the struggle between the emperor and the shogun. Guess what? We supported a losing team, shogun. And the emperor won. Oh boy, he punished us in 1868 by taking all of our land and then give it to the peasants. So my great-grandfather was heartbroken. So that's when we immigrated to Hawaii. and became a plantation worker for Doe family, picking the pineapple. Instead of chopping the heads, chopping the pineapple. So that's how we started. So actually, I guess I could call myself Hawaiian. Third generation Japanese American. And somebody made a comment yesterday. He said, "You know what, Tosh? You don't look like Japanese. What are you?" I said, "I'm a Hawaiian." But anyway, to just kids aside, I'm going to tell you, you could survive the nuclear attack. I am the living example. My sister and I are the only two survived within a half a mile from the center. She's going to be 76 years old. I'm 72 and a half. So if you're prepared, you could survive. Unfortunately, the rest of those people that passed away in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or not necessarily Nagasaki, Hiroshima, my father saw contrail of 3 B-29 coming into the city at 31,000 feet. You have to understand the B-29 was one of those beautiful bombers, silver, 144 feet long with a 100-foot wingspan, beautiful plane, making a white contrail coming into the city. They should have alarmed the siren so the people of Hiroshima could have taken shelter into the bomb shelter. But that was a daily event. So they were conditioned to ignore the contrails. And of course, one of those planes, Enola Gay and Necessary Evil and Great Artiste, those are the three names of B-29 that came into the city. And Enola Gay dropped. Little boy weighed 10,000 pounds, 3 feet in diameter, 10 feet long. Matter of fact, remember I told you that they have to have 43 seconds. So they had to drop the bomb in a horizontal position. So they dropped the bomb as they were climbing. So the bomb would lay flat as it fell toward the ground. And they practiced that over and over and over at Wendover. I had no clue when we got there in 1961 that was the place. Anyway, so it is, or the scientists from Los Alamos said, "Tosh, I don't know how you did it, but 12 weeks is a magic number." I said, "What do you mean by that?" At 12 weeks, your DNA is complete. And you were small enough and weighed perfect weight. So when your mother got hit in the tummy at 2 miles per second, all you did is bounce around inside of her. And he said that was the safest place that you could have survived the nuclear attack. So before I was born, I was already prepared. Anyway, I always question myself, how did we survive? Because your ladies, when you start to conceive the babies, doctor will tell you, don't fall stairs, don't get in an accident, don't get hit on the tummy, because you might lose that baby, right? But she got to remember, hit 10,560 feet per second. You know, that's faster than a jet airplane that cruises at 600 miles an hour. Or the 223 rifle bullet goes at 2,500 feet per second. So I don't know how I stayed in there. But anyway, everything has a happy endings, right? I could not imagine that I met Rita in Harmony. I didn't know what it was. So I asked my son, what is it? He said, well, that's online dating. You don't go to bar, you don't go to church, you just go to work and come home. You have a chance to meet the ladies. So he said, I give you 3 months subscription of eHarmony. Would you believe in 3 months, I had over 700 hits? But most of those people were outside of the state of Utah. I didn't want to have a relationship outside of the state, so I kept looking for somebody local. And I finally met that lady from North Carolina. She happened to live in Sandy, outside of Salt Lake City. And guess what? Fate is something. She happened to be a writer. My father and I wanted to publish our book of our family. All these years, we were looking for somebody to help us to write a book. And there she is. So she asked me, let's get working. It took us 4 years to write this book. But I'm really glad that we did it, because now we got some record to pass it on to younger generations as a record. But I want to go back to how to prepare for nuclear weapons, because it is possible to survive. Remember, most of you are taught going to school, duck and cover. That is the most important thing you could ever do when you get an alarm button saying the missile is coming in. Duck and cover. Don't go out to the window to look for the flashlight. Duck and cover. Now, in Hiroshima, I'm sure you've seen those documentaries. When the bomb exploded, you see smoke on the surface of the building, puff of smoke. And all of a sudden, force coming back from the outside and sniffing away the fire. So fire didn't start immediately. All that energy was inside of the building material. It took 20 minutes to burn spontaneously. Fortunately, my mother was able to wake up in time to get out of there before the fire started. She was knocked out unconscious by one of the main supporting beam hit over the head and split open the forehead and cut over the vein on the right arm. She was bleeding profusely. And all she could think of is my brother and my sister. They were crying for help underneath the debris. So she got her on the knees and hand looking for the siblings, and she found my brother first. His legs were sticking above the debris, so she yanked him out. Oh my gosh. His head was like a water fountain. Blood was squirting everywhere. She thought his head was crushed. So immediately she touched his head, but it wasn't broken. So she tried to hold him on her arm because she was nursing, breastfeeding when the bomb exploded. The force came from underneath and they went and lost track of my brother. But he didn't want to be held. He stuck his little arm out. And I said to my mother, I tell you why, because you must have looked like a monster, bleeding from the head. And she kept telling me that all she could see is red, where the blood was going into her eyes. And she said she felt heat on her face. It wasn't burning yet. All that kinetic energy was absorbed in the building material, getting hot. And then the miracle happened. Oh, before that, she found my sister, same condition. Her leg was sticking out. She yanked her out. And this time, she had a sash. She was praying with it when the bomb exploded. Japanese lady used that to tie the baby on her back. And we had a family crest on that sash. And she was praying with it. She still had it. So she put her on her back, and somehow she managed to hold my brother and look to the front gate. You know what? It was intact. Even though the house collapsed, the front gate was intact. But before she woke up, she heard the voices, woman's voice, begging her to get up 3 times, calling her name. Shizue, 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 wake up, wake up. So that's when she opened her eyes from an unconscious condition, and she was able to get out of the house. When she got out, that's what she saw. As far as she could see, the entire city was flattened. No more Hiroshima Castle. So she wanted to run to my father's headquarters, which was just 200 yards away, 5th Army headquarters. And she didn't realize her clothing was torn to pieces. She was almost naked. But everybody else was naked. All the people they met was all naked with the skin hanging by the nails. You know when you peel the skin of the tomato, that's what the flesh looked like. Skin tomatoes, red and raw. So anyway, my mother ran to the headquarters, and my father was riding his horse, white stallion, in his underwear, white boxer short, and a white T-shirt. His uniform disintegrated when he was running to the headquarters. First, he lost the sleeves, the buttons, the pocket, and the shorts. Everything disintegrated because the heat was so intense. It was 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And my father was one step outside of an overpass in the shadow, except his head was poking above the shadow. So he lost all his skin on the back of his head, but he survived. He blown away to an irrigation ditch. So that's how he wound up in the headquarters with his underwear. By the way, please remember this as long as you live. You wear white. White is the key. When the bomb blows up, the light that I mentioned to you, it will reflect the white. The Japanese ladies used to wear a black designed kimonos. They were all burnt to death. But stay away from the water, because 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit would turn the water to a boiling water. But you could imagine all these people that burned, all they could think of is jump in the river. But the river was boiling. They got cooked. So, the first thing first is duck and cover, wear white clothing. When you get your bombing alarm, and make sure you take shelter. Now remember I mentioned to you there's 15,000 bombs today. And my dream someday is to eradicate all the bombs. But I realize that's an impossible task. But now my job is to teach you how to survive the nuclear attack. Because I survived. There's no better person than I'm telling you to how to survive. Now, when you happen to able to survive the first initial attack, make sure you get out of the debris 20 minutes. Because if you don't, you'll be burned to death. I'm sure thousands of people are able to survive the initial blast, but they couldn't get out. They're burned to death. Like our neighbor was trapped under the house. My mother could not pull her out of the collapsed house. So she told her, please be patient. I'm going to go to the headquarters and get you help. But it was too late. She burned to death. Now, 2 hours after the blast, you're going to have a storm coming in. Black cloud. And the rain will come. And hail will come. They are pure black. And the rain is black. But those people that survived and their flesh was burning, they opened their mouth, welcome the rain. They drank that radioactive rain, and then most of them passed away 2 weeks after. So stay away from the outside, take a shelter. So my goal is not only to teach, I want to implement back the civil defense shelter. So you could take a shelter when there was an imminent attack. But the shelter is not just for the bomb. Any kinds of disaster, the earthquake, tornado, typhoon, or flooding, that's where the citizens take shelter. But we did away with it after the Cold War. We need to put that back. So please help me to put the civil defense shelter. That is going to be the key to our survival. And you are people that preparing for disaster. I could not have asked any perfect group to be begging for civil defense shelter. We really need to have that implemented for future. Remember Hawaii, when they had a false alarm of the nuclear missile coming in? Those people didn't know what to do. They were running all over the downtown Honolulu. One man even opened a manhole, asking the little girl to go down in the manhole. That's the wrong thing to do. I lost my man one day. I took him down there. He died from carbon monoxide because gas was trapped inside of the manhole. But if we had a shelter, That's where you could go and survive. And I know Shane Kano, by the way, he's sitting there smiling. He has a map of all the civil defense shelter in this country. All we have to do is activate that shelter again and ask the Congress to initiate the act to put that civil defense again, because that's a best way to protect our citizens. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention to you, the book is available outside. It's called Passport to Hiroshima. So when you buy, I'll be happy to sign it for you. And also, I'm going to pass out these radiation triage cards. Since you are in charge of the disaster preparedness, I want you to have this card. This monitors the radiation exposure. If you put it in your pocket and go outside, it doesn't last long. But if you put this in the freezer, it will last forever. Whenever you need to, take it out of the freezer and take it with you to respond to the disaster, okay? So I'm going to leave this at the front desk.